Hello, everybody. It's Friday, so it's Star Trek Next Generation Day. You know, here at the D. Louise book series, we believe in series. We believe in watching and binge watching series. We also believe in binge watching and reading book series. I'm a series person. I like series. I like to read about the character progression from book to book to book. We're doing J.D. Robb. We're doing Eve Dallas. She solves a murder each book, but the relationships grow each book from book to book to book. We're doing the Arginos, Carolyn Sparks. We're doing At Stakes. No, Carolyn Sparks is At Stakes, and Lindsay Sands is the Arginos. And we're doing Laurel K. Hamilton later. And we'll be doing Janet Ivanovich soon, Stephanie Plum. And don't forget Flashback Mondays. We're looking at books that I purchased and was heavily into back in 2007 right now. So this is Star Trek Friday. This is the D. Louise Book Series channel. I'm Kristina, Kristina. And if you've been watching my previous Star Trek videos, you knew that my baby was ill and he was having seizures. My kitty cat, he has since passed away very, very unexpectedly. He went from being absolutely just fine, perfect, clean bill of health from the vet, the whole 9 yards, to dying. So it's been a very, very hard week for me. He was an emotional support cat, which is a very, very rare thing. Most cats are, I will hold you when I want to be held, or I will come to you when I want to come to you. He and his mom, who passed away 10 years ago from a brain tumor, which is apparently what he died of too, a brain tumor, he didn't care. He would sit in my lap 24/7. I could carry him around 24/7. I could pet him, hug him as much as I wanted. He was always with me. He was always underfoot. So it's going to be really hard. And I'm going to give it some time. But I'm going to look for another emotional support cat. It's going to be hard, though. They're really hard to find. And I don't know. I need an emotional support cat in my life. I do. And come here. Miss Smokey is trying. She's trying really hard. She's trying to help. She's not an emotional support cat, but she's trying. She's really trying to help, and she's mourning too. She's mourning her older brother. He was almost 19 years old. So anyways, let me let you go, because I know you want to go. Again, Sinatra wouldn't care. I don't know why. I tried looking it up, and these are not the air dates. They weren't aired in this. At least that's what I found. It could be wrong. I could have looked at the wrong place. But we did. We finished the Borg. We're in season 4, disc 1. We did episode 175, Best of Both Worlds, part 2. We are now doing the family 178. Then we'll do 177 and 176. I do not know why they're out of order. They did not air this way on TV. At least that's the information I found. It could be wrong, but that's how they are in this. And in 78, they talk like they just finished 75. So we'll have to see what that's about. But this screen is different. So initially, here we go, the family. Initially, there's an overview from the captain. The Enterprise remains docked at McKinley Station, undergoing a major overhaul and refit following the Borg incident. I am confident that the ship and the crew will soon be ready to return to service. Just wanted to show you the overview of the ship in the station above Earth. It was pretty. A lot of extras, they get bragging rights forever. Hey, I even had a line. I got to appear on stage with Jonathan Frakes. Woohoo! I was on Star Trek for a day. We're in the observation lounge, and Riker is going over reports and tells the crew member to take the tablet to engineering. Worf comes in and says phaser upgrades are complete. Riker says already? Worf says we have begun power supply calibrations. Riker says you are just too damn efficient. Worf says thank you. Riker says continue with the testing. Here is the final schedule for the shore leave and for the personal transfers. By the way, I'm looking forward to meeting your parents. Worf is like, huh? Riker says yes, they are on the visitors list. You didn't know? Worf says no, sir. It is inappropriate for a Klingon to receive family while on duty. As humans, my parents do not understand. Riker says, I am not sure that I would either, since this is not a Klingon ship. If you don't want to see your parents, that's your business. But we don't get to Earth all that often. I'm sure we can arrange for you to have more off-duty time while they are here. Worf says, no, that's not necessary. Riker says, dismiss. Then says, Mr. Worf, if you are worried they might learn about what happened on the Klingon planet. Worf says, not at all, sir. I have already informed them in my correspondence of my discommendation. I do not believe any human can truly understand my dishonor. And you know, the whole thing with Worf and his discommendation was he did it just to help his brother and help other people. He didn't do it for himself. And I know we will eventually reveal the truth. The truth will come out later on. Are you back? Are you going to sit with me, Miss Smokey? So, anyways, we're in the captain's quarters, and Troy is asking Captain Picard, so where have you decided to go? Picard says, what? Oh, France, Lebert, my home village. Troy says, really? Picard says, yes, first time in almost 20 years. Troy says, interesting. Picard says, counselor. Troy says, I just find it interesting that Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the man who couldn't be pried out of his seat for a vacation for 3 years, Picard says, it's Earth. It's home. Do I need another reason? Troy says, I don't know. What do you think? Picard says, counselor, your help has been invaluable during my recovery, but look, I'm better. The injuries are healing. Troy says, those you can see in a mirror. Picard says, the nightmares have ended. All I need now is a little time to myself. Troy says, I agree. In fact, I'm delighted that you are going, but it's just that the choice of where you are going could stand some scrutiny. Picard says, if you wish to believe my going home is a direct result of being held captive by the Borg, be my guest. Troy, is that what you believe? Don't you, if you go to a shrink, or even on the TV shows, you see it, the shrinks never answer the questions. They always ask you. They turn it around and they ask you. Picard says, I hate it when you do that. Troy says, Captain, you do need time. You cannot achieve complete recovery so quickly. And it is perfectly normal after what you've been through to spend a great deal of time trying to find yourself again. Picard says, and what better place to find oneself than on the streets of one's home village? Troy says, interesting. Have a good trip, Captain. I would like to point out that when Picard finishes packing, he takes books. Real, physical books. No Kindle for his butt. It's nice to see Calamini Chief O'Brien back, isn't it? Even though his role is kind of small on this one compared to the last one, but it's still nice to see him. I still think he should be a recurring character. Or maybe he's a recurring character, but he's not logged as one until Deep Space Nine. I know. Um, Worf asks O'Brien, they still have not signals. O'Brien says, no, sir. Worf says, my mother is never on time. It's so human of her. O'Brien says, well, you know women. Worf says, I'm not looking forward to this. I wish they would come so this would begin and end sooner. O'Brien says, I know what you mean, Lieutenant. Worf says, unlikely. O'Brien says, the last time my old man came on board, I found him chasing Nurse Stanton around a biobed in sick bay. Worf says, I'm not concerned about my father chasing nurses. O'Brien says, yeah, but it's always something with parents, isn't it? So Worf's parents beam aboard. Worf says, mother, father. Helena says, Worf. Sergei says, you look good, son. Put on a little weight, did you? Worf says, no! Sergei says, sure you have. Looks good on you. Still working out with those holodeck monsters, I bet. Worf says, let me take you to your two. Sergei goes over to Chief O'Brien and says, always good to meet another Chief Petty Officer. Introduces himself as formerly of the USS Intrepid. O'Brien says, Mile Edward O'Brien, good to meet you, sir. Sergei says, don't call me sir. I am used to work for a living. Helen says he's joking. The proudest moment of his life was when Worf earned his commission. Sergei says, Chief, can you imagine an old enlisted man like me raising a boy to be an officer? Worf says, I will show you to your quarters. Helen says, come on, Sergei. There's plenty of time to chat with the boys. Your father's so been looking forward to this. Sergei says, I want to see everything, the whole ship. I've got all the specs and diagrams of the Galaxy-class ships at home. Worf says, we are in the midst of repair. I will not be able to give you a complete tour. Sergei says, oh, I'm sure if you ask the captain. Helena says, you agreed not to embarrass him, Sergei. Besides, we came to see Worf, not the ship. Sergei says, okay, fine. Helen says, your hair is a little longer, isn't it, Worf? The next scene is Captain Picard walking towards his home. And he says, all right, whoever you are, I can hear you. Renee comes out. Picard says, oh Lord, a highwayman. He says, what? Picard says a highwayman is a robber who attacks travelers, but none have been reported in this vicinity for centuries. Renee says, I'm not a robber. Picard says, oh, I'm much relieved, sir. Renee says, I know who you are. Picard says, then you have the advantage. Renee says, you're my nephew, Jean-Luc from the starship Enterprise. Picard says, then you must be my uncle, Renee. Renee says, I'm not your uncle. It's the other way around. Picard says, too bad. I rather enjoyed the idea. Renee says, why have you been away so long? Picard says, well, Starfleet keeps me very busy. Renee says, Father says you don't like it here. Picard says, I'm sure you misunderstood. Renee says, no, I didn't. He said so. Ah, well, Robert and I, well, perhaps it's time to change all that. Renee says, you don't seem so arrow. Picard says, arrogant? He said, yeah, arrogant. You don't seem that way to me. What does it mean anyway, arrogant? Picard says, let's talk about it later, shall we? Renee runs up and says, Mommy, he's here. Marie says, Jean-Luc. Picard says, Marie. Marie says, it's so good to finally meet you. Picard says, me too. Marie says, how are you? Picard says, fine. Fine. I'm fine. You know what's wrong with the English language? Well, it depends on how you look at it. But every other language in the world puts the verb and the action at the end. We put it at the beginning. Just something out there. So Marie says, well, Robert and I are delighted that you've come to stay with us. Picard, I was just thinking that I really might be imposing, so I could easily stay in the village. Marie says, well, I won't hear of it. It's your home. It will always be your home. Marie says, do things look that different? Picard says, no. In fact, the amazing thing is how little it has changed. And I will refer you to Picard seasons 1 and 2, where the whole thing takes place here. The first 2 seasons take place here at the house. But they never say what happens to these people. They never do. He says, everything is exactly as I remembered. The hills, the house, every tree, every bush seems untouched by the passage of time. Marie says, Robert worked hard to keep it that way. It's very important for him. Picard says, as it was to our father. Renee says, sometimes I'm going to be a starship captain. Picard grins. Even you, uncle, you look so much like Robert when he was your age. I half expect to see myself as a boy run out the door to play. Marie says, Robert can't wait to see you. Picard says, yes, Renee already told me. Picard says, where is he? Marie says, as usual with his vines. The one thing that bugs me about this scene, he's eating the grapes right off the vine. So they haven't even been washed. They could have chemicals on them from growth. He's got grape juice all over his thing. He's got mud on his hands. He's eating with mud on his hands. Robert says, so you've arrived at last. Welcome home, Captain. Picard says, hello, Robert. Robert says, did you shuttle out from the village? Picard says, no, I decided to walk. I met Marie and Renee. Robert says, good. Picard says, it's good to see you. Robert says, tired? No, well, make yourself at home. You know where everything is. We generally eat at 8. I'll be in a minute. I've got to save these poor sick vine. I will see you shortly. He's eating the sick grapes then? With his dirty, muddy hands and got grapes all over his face? I don't know. The whole thing just seems unsanitary to me. Okay, the next scene is back on the Enterprise in Beverly's quarters. Troy's there. Beverly says, so you will have a chance to visit the surface. Troy says, maybe. Will and I have been talking about getting back to Angel Falls. Beverly says, oh, Venezuela, that's very beautiful. Again, the writers are putting Troy and Will together. Why can't they leave them together? Why do they throw other people in their way? Why do we have to wait till the movie? Beverly says, I left it in storage a long time ago. After Jack died, odds and ends mostly. Troy reads cover of book, How to Advance Your Career Through Marriage. Beverly says it's a joke. He sent me that while I was in medical school. It was his way of proposing. Beverly picks up disc. Troy asks, what is that? Beverly says, it's for Wesley, from Jack. I'd forgotten about it. Maybe I was trying to forget about it. Troy says, why? Beverly says, Jack recorded a holographic message to Wesley just after he was born. It was a gift for when he grew up. Jack was going to make more of them, but he never had the chance. Troy says, are you afraid of what it might say? Beverly says, no. I just don't know if it will do more harm than good. He's managed to finally deal with his father's death, but Troy says Wesley has a lot of questions about his father, things that you can't answer for him. Perhaps seeing this will help him to understand. Okay, the next scene, we're in engineering. Sergi says, so we walk into the school and we didn't know what to expect. Is Worf hurt? Is he in some kind of trouble? The door opens and we see our 7-year-old sitting in a chair and glancing across the room at 5 teenage boys, all of them with bloody noses. Helena says, and then the principal looked up and said, tell me he's an only child. Worf says the older boys were disrespectful. Sergi says, and that was only the beginning, when he was 10. Worf says, we've taken enough of the commander's time. Geordi says, oh, no, we're ahead of schedule. Sergi says, I just wanted to tell him the story about... Helena says, enough stories, Sergi, that's it, get it. Sergi's like, okay, enough stories. Well, then, how about giving me a look at the new engine core? I used to be a warp field specialist on the old Excelsior class. Geordi says, I'll be delighted, Mrs. Rosenko. Helena, no. You two go ahead. Your father will be there for hours. Why don't you show me the arbitorium, she says to Worf. Worf says, Commander LaForge, call me when my father wishes to leave. Sergi says, I can find my own way. Turbolift 4 is over there. Right, I have all the specs and designs at home. Geordi says the theta matrix compositor makes the recrystallization process 10 times more efficient than on the Excelsior class. Sergi says, amazing, Commander. If you have a couple of minutes, there's something else I'd like to ask you. Geordi says, sure, Chief. It's about my son. And we never ever learn what he says to Geordi. So then we're at Picard's house. Again, go watch seasons 1 and 2 to see what the house looks like X number of years later. Marie says, and your friend Louis wants you to contact him as soon as you're settled. Picard, is he still trying to raise the ocean floor? Marie says, oh yes, he's excited about it. He's made a supervisor now, as his wife is constantly reminding anyone who'll listen. Picard says, I don't see why Earth needs another... Robert says, I don't see why Earth needs another subcontinent. Picard, oh, it's really quite exciting, actually, when you understand the potential of exploring a whole new world on your own planet. Robert says, well, I guess I just don't understand that potential. Marie says, the mayor wants to give you a parade. Picard says, a parade? And give you the keys to the city. Picard's like, no! Robert says, he just needs a little arm twisting, dear, a little coaxing. Picard says, no, I don't want. I just want to rest and spend some time with my family. Well, Marie, I've already warned the mayor not to make any plans without talking to us. Picard's like, thank you. Picard's drinking the wine. He says, is this the 46? Robert says the 47. You've been drinking too much of that artificial stuff. What do they call it? Synthahol? It spoiled you. It ruined your palate. Picard, on the contrary, I think that the synthahol heightens one's appreciation for the genuine article. She's sitting here on the floor next to me. Is that my Smokey? Robert says, delicious, Marie. Picard says, leave it to Robert to find the best chef in France and marry her. Robert, sadly, cooking is becoming a lost art thanks to your record technology. Marie, Robert and I have discussed a few times about getting a replicator in the house. Picard says, I can remember the same discussion between mother and father. Robert says, father understood better than anybody else the danger of losing those values which we hold most generous. Picard said, I don't see what you have anything to lose just by adding a convenience. Robert says, well, you wouldn't, but in my view, life is already too convenient. Not for me. I'll take a replicator. I'll take a turbo lift. I'll take a beam me up too. You know, that would cure traffic problems. We would have no traffic problems. We wouldn't have to pay for fuel either. Well, you wouldn't, but in my view, life is already too convenient. Marie said this is a very old argument. Robert says it is. Renee says, I did a report on starships for school. Marie says, and he won a ribbon for it. Renee says, the teacher even said it was one of the best he'd ever read. Picard says, good for you, Uncle. You know what? I once wrote a report on starships when I was about your age. Did you get a ribbon too? Picard says, I don't recall. Robert says, and I don't find your modesty very convincing, brother. Of course you won the ribbon. You always did. Renee says, do you still have it, your report? Picard says, no, I don't think so. Marie says, why don't you go and get it, and then you can read it to your uncle. Robert says, it's hard enough to protect him from all that's out there without you encouraging him. Picard says, I'm not encouraging him, but if you weren't so narrow-minded, if you allowed him to see the world as it really is. Robert says, well, you raise your sons as you would wish and allow me to do the same with mine. I will refer you to Season 3 of Star Trek Picard for sons. I got another co-host. Isn't she cute? She's the baby of the family. She's a widow baby. She's a widow. So, go on. Picard is meeting with Louis out in the field. Louis says, one man's idea of paradise. Picard says, two men, Robert's and my father's. Louis, never did I know anyone less interested in grapes than you, Jean-Luc. No, not true. I was interested, Louis, and I was proud that my family were helping to preserve traditions. But I did not feel bound by those traditions. Louis says, you always reach for the future, your brother for the past. Picard said, there should be room for both in this life. Picard says, and what about you, old Vasca? You've taken quite a shift in the future yourself. Louis says, well, hydroponics turned out to be so dull. Picard said, you should have listened to me from the beginning. Lewis, if I had listened to you, I never would have taken that cycling trip with the Bloom sisters. Picard says, and broken your leg. Lewis says, and got married twice. Picard says, I hear you've been promoted to supervisor of the Atlantis project. Lewis, I'm one of 200 supervisors, although my wife would have you believe I run the entire project. Picard says, it's certainly very exciting work. I've kept up with it in the journals. Lewis is like, really? Picard's like, there's only one thing I don't understand. You were such a rotten swimmer. Lewis, thinking of you working on the ocean floor. Lewis, I suppose we all find ways to confront our greatest fears. Picard says, seriously, how do you plan to accelerate the buildup on the underside of the mantle without increasing stress on the titanic plates? Lewis says, you really have kept up, haven't you? The truth is we don't know yet. Picard says the Enterprise used harmonic resonators to relieve the tectonic pressures on Gemma 4. It's obviously not exactly the same problem, but Lewis, it's a shame. The government's been looking for someone to take over the project, a real leader who will go in there and get things moving. They're looking for you, Jean-Luc, but I know you'd never leave Starfleet. No, I'd never leave Starfleet. Lewis says, that's what I thought, but if nothing else, why don't I send over some of the internal studies of the tectonic problems since you're interested? We could use any thoughts you might have. Picard says, all right. So then we are in 10 forward. Sergei says it's a great crew, son, and they think the world of you. Helena says they really do. Worf says, Mother, Father, I wish you would be a little more reserved while you are on board. Oh, I know, we go too far sometimes. Sergei, we were just excited to be here. Riker's voice comes over the comm. Riker to Lieutenant Worf, go ahead. Riker's calm voice, I need to talk to you about the phaser test results. On my way, Commander. Have Guinan call me if you need anything. So Worf leaves the room. Sergei, maybe we should just leave it alone. Elena says, I can't leave it alone. I'm his mother. And I'm wondering, somewhere down the line, the kid comes into effect, right? And they take care of the kid for him. Guinan says, sooner or later, everyone comes in here. They stand by those windows and they look out and they stare at the stars. They are looking for that little star they call home. It doesn't matter how far away it is. Everybody looks away. I'm Guinan. Helena says, how do you do? Guinan says, pleased to meet you. You are Worf's parents. Sergei and Helena Rosenko. Guinan says, well, welcome. Sit, please. She says, there is something I would like to ask you. Helena says, please. Guinan says, how come you never gave him prune juice? Helena says, I beg your pardon? Guinan says, well, he said he never had it until he came here. Now he can't get enough of it. My grandma used to drink prune juice every day to keep herself regular. Helena says, Worf? Sergei says he never wanted any human food while he was growing up. Everything had to be Klingon. Helena says, I learned to cook roged pie. Sergei says, however, we never quite learned to eat it. Helena says, it's difficult adolescence. Guinan says, but you got through it. Sergei says, we didn't do anything special. Guinan says, didn't you? Just look at him. I think he's pretty special. Helena says, we knew it wouldn't be easy for him growing up without other Klingons to turn to for guidance. Sergei says, we had to let him discover and explore his heritage by himself. Let him find his own path. Guinan says, so many parents could learn so much from the two of you. Helena says, well, I'm afraid that Worf feels that we do not understand him. Guinan says, well, part of him may feel that way, but there is another part that I have seen. The part that comes in and drinks prune juice. The part that looks out the windows towards home. But he's not looking towards Klingon. He's looking towards you, towards Earth. Back at the house, John Claude. Anita Blake, you enter my life. What can I tell you? Picard, Marie says, are you all right? And Picard says, actually, I seem to have a rather disturbing story. Lewis mentioned that the Atlantis project needed a director, and I found myself actually thinking about it. Marie says that, why shouldn't you? Picard says, oh, leaving my career, the Enterprise. Marie says, considering what you've just been through. Picard says, no, it's not that, or is it? Marie says, besides, it would be wonderful to have you back home. Given a little time, maybe you and your brother might even get to like each other. Picard says, well, I never already like his choice in wives. I never thanked you for your correspondence. It made me feel like part of the family. Marie says, you are not like part of the family. You are family, Jean-Luc. Robert says, don't worry, dear. I've got it. Because the doorbell rang. So Louis comes in. Marie says, let me get you some wine. You can talk business. Louis says, business. Picard says, there's nothing much to talk about. Louis says, I'm interested to know what you thought of our plan. Picard says, well, I have had only a chance to glance at them. I have a few ideas. Louis says, wonderful. We should discuss them with the Board of Governors. I have set up a meeting. Picard says, a meeting? Louis says, just a preliminary conversation tomorrow morning. Picard says, preliminary to what? Louis says, they want you. I mentioned your interest in the project. That's all. That's all I had to say. They jumped at the prospect. Picard says, I never said there was a prospect. Louis says, at least listen to them, Jean-Luc. Picard says, all right, very good, fine, I'll listen to them. Louis says, you won't regret it, Jean-Luc. I promise you, I will see you in the morning. Then we're in Beverly's quarters office. Worf says, I don't understand, Mom. What kind of message? Beverly says, I don't know exactly. Your father made it a few weeks after you were born. Wesley's like, why? He thought it was important to say certain things and make sure that he didn't forget to tell you later. Wesley said, do you know what it says? Beverly says, no. He wanted you to have this when you turned 18, and I want you to have it too. You know, every time I see Sergi, I'm thinking Fiddler on the Roof because he played the fiddler in the Fiddler on the Roof. They're in Worf quarters. Sergi says, are we disturbing you? Worf says, no, I thought you were going to your quarters to sleep. Helena says, we just came by to tuck you in. Worf says, when I heard you were on the visitors list, I was not sure I wanted you to come, but I'm glad you came. Helena said, we had to come. Sergi says, our boy was in trouble. After we read your letter about your discommendation from the Klingons, of course we had to come. Helena says, we don't exactly understand it all. Sergi says, we don't have to. We know that what kind of man you are. Helena says, whatever you did, we know it was for a good reason. Worf says, I must bear my dishonor alone. Sergi says, that's not true. Elena says, I'm sorry if this is too human of us, but whatever you are suffering, you must remember we are with you. Sergi says, and that we are proud of you, and that we love you. Helena says, you are our son. And remember, this will get away, be overturned before the season ends. Well, I don't know if this season, but before the series ends anyway. So then we're back at the Picard house. Robert says, careful, you're not used to drinking the real thing. Your synthesol never leaves you out of control. Is that so? Picard says, that's so. Robert says, then, well, this will. Now, there's something I'd like to see. Picard says, what is that? Robert says, the gallant captain out of control. Mind if I ask you a question? Picard's like, all right. Robert says, what the devil happened up to you there? Picard says, is this brotherly concern? Robert says, no, curiosity. What did they do to you? Picard says, you know what happened. Robert says, no, precisely. I gather you were hurt, humiliated. I always thought you needed a little humiliation. Or was it humility? Either would do. Why do you walk away? This isn't your style. Picard says, I'm tired of fighting with you, Robert. Robert says, tired? Picard says, that's right. Robert is tired of the Enterprise too. The great Captain Picard of Starfleet falls to Earth to plunge into the water with Louis. That isn't the brother I remember. Still, I suppose it must seem like an ideal situation, huh? Local boy makes good, returns home after 20 years to a hero's welcome. Picard says, I am not a hero. Robert says, of course you are. You admitted. You never settle for less than that. You never will. Picard says, that is not true. Robert says, cancel the parade in your favor. Robert says, no. I never sought that rubbish. Robert says, never saw it, never saw it. President of the School of Valedictorian, athlete, hero with your arms raised in victory. Picard says, valedictorian, arms raised in victory. Were you jealous? Robert says, yes, damn it. I was always so jealous, and I had a right to be. Picard says, a right? Robert says, I was always your brother, watching you receive the cheers, watching you break every rule a father made and get away with it. Picard says, why didn't you break a few rules? Robert's like, because I was the elder brother, the responsible one. It was my job to look after you. Picard says, look after me? You were a bully. Robert says, yes, sometimes maybe. Even I enjoyed bullying you. Picard, all right, try it now. Robert says, why did you come back, Jean-Luc? Did you come back because you wanted me to look after you again? Picard says, damn it, and he hits his brother. And that's rare. We have never seen Picard get violent, throw first strike, ever. This is the first time we see him hit first. Um, and then they get all muddy in the pile and puddle and the whole nine yards. Picard says, you were asking for it. You know, Robert says, but you needed it. You could have been terribly hard on yourself. Picard says, you don't know, Robert. You don't know. They took everything from me that I was. They used me, kill, and destroy. I could not stop them. I should have been able to stop them. I tried so hard. But I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't good enough. I should have been able to stop them. I should. Robert says, so my brother is human after all. This is going to be with you a long time, Jean-Luc, a long time. Season 3, Picard. You have to learn to live with it. You have a simple choice now. Live with it below the sea with Lewis or above the clouds with the Enterprise. Picard says, you know, I think you were right after all. I think I did come back so that you could help me. Robert says, so, do you know what? I still don't like you, Jean-Luc. Then they're singing some French songs or something. And then Marie walks in and says, what in the world? What happened here? Robert says, Picard said it was entirely my fault, Marie. Robert says, yes, you see, he fell and then I fell. Picard says, we both fell together. Marie says, have you been fighting? Robert says, fighting? No. Marie says, shame on you both. What would your father say if he saw you like this? Picard says, he'd probably send us to bed without our supper. Marie says, well, it's a good to get it out of your system. Picard says, perhaps, Marie, perhaps it was. I'll contact Lewis and cancel the meeting with the Board of Governors. It's time for me to be going. Marie, already, Jean-Luc? Picard says, the ship will be ready to leave orbit as soon, and I belong on board. If I ever doubt that again, I know where to come. All right, the next scene is Wesley on the holodeck. Jack says, hello, Wesley. As I make this recording, you're just 10 weeks old. I wanted you to know who I am today. You see, this Jack Crusher won't exist by the time you grow up. I'll be older, more experienced, hopefully a little wiser. But this person you will be gone, and I wanted you to know who your father was when you came into this world. When I see you lying in your crib, I realize that I don't know the first thing about being a father. So let me just apologize for all the mistakes I'm about to make as you grow up. I hope you don't grow up resenting the fact that I was gone so much. That comes with the uniform. Right now, I'm waiting for an assignment on the USS Stargazer. I don't know if I can explain why Starfleet means so much to me. Maybe you'll understand when you get this record. Maybe you'll even want to try some of these on. He points to the uniform. You'll probably be a doctor like your mother. You are only a baby, but it's remarkable. I can see in your face all the people I've loved in my life. Your mother, my father, and my mother are family. I can see me in you too. I can feel that you are my son. I don't know how to describe it, but there's a connection, this bond. I will always be part of you, Wesley. Well, I hope this makes some sense to you. I'm not sure it does to me, but maybe I will do better next time. I love you, Wesley. Wesley says, goodbye, Dad. The next scene, we're back at Jean-Luc's house. Marie says, come back to us again. Goodbye, Jean-Luc, and be careful. Picard says, take care, Uncle. Renee says, someday I'll be leaving for my ship too. Picard says, there's plenty of time for that. You may decide to do something else as you get older. Try not to be so narrow-minded. Robert said, here, Jean-Luc, a little of the 47. Do not drink it all at once. And if possible, try not to drink it alone. And they hug and kiss goodbye. And he leaves. Worf's parents are leaving. Helena says, is there anything you want us to send you from home? No, perhaps some of your roebuck pie. Helena says, it's been a while, but I think I still remember how. Worf, Captain Picard comes in. Worf says, Captain, welcome back. Picard says, thank you, Lieutenant. Worf says, Captain, these are my parents, Sergei and Helena Rosenko. Picard says, delighted. Sergei says, quite a ship you have here, Captain. You've got the full tour, I trust. Sergei says, well, actually, there are still a few areas because of the repairs. Helena says, Sergei, it's time to go. Sergei says, yes, okay. I still have all the specs and diagrams. And the last scene, which we would think would be with Picard and Riker or something getting underway, stuff like that. No, it's back in Paris. And Helene Marie is saying he's still out there staring at the stars, dreaming of what his adventures lie. And Robert goes, yes, let him dream. So we have finished Family, Star Trek, Season 4, Episode 2. So next week we'll do 177 The Brothers. I'm doing it the way it was on the disc, out of order. I don't know why it's out of order on the disc. I tried looking the dates it aired, and it didn't air this way. But it seems the storyline runs this way. So next week we'll do 177. So this is Star Trek Season 4, Disc 1, Episode 178, The Family. Next week we'll do 177 The Brothers and 176 Suddenly Human. And don't forget Flashback Mondays. And don't forget we're doing Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake. The Arginos, we're doing Lindsay Sands, The Ad Stakes. We're going to start Janet and J.D. Robb. We're going to continue and get going with the series there because I'm a series person and I like series. And please enjoy your Friday. I am possibly, if you're still here at this point in time, let you know that I may be in the middle of a hurricane later. So please check it out. Like and subscribe. Thumbs up, please. Thank you.